Welcome back to Hacker Hangouts on another Saturday morning, diving into working remote and overemployment and I don't know, a bunch of other topics which we started discussing like after stream last week. But first, before we even jump into like interesting content, or I would say like the main course, I have to call out the thumbnail for this stream, like is amazing, like absolutely amazing, and I credit that to Gowry, and it's incredible. It really is.
You credit me with it? I typed like 4 sentences into ChatGPT, which now has the DALL-E extension, and it spits this out. And I'm like, well, it actually didn't spit just this one out. It spit out like a couple different ones, and this is like an amalgamation of 2 of them.
I'll put it on screen. Someone asked me what was the original prompt for it. Braden did.
The original prompt, I'll read it, was a split scenario in 1920 by 1080 resolution. On the left, a white male hacker with long strawberry blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail and a short beard works from his home office. He is comfortably dressed in a bathrobe and has a headset on. His desk has a laptop, notes, and a coffee mug. On the right, a white male manager with a long salt and pepper beard and a shaved head, bald, stands in a corporate office setting. He has no hair on the top of his head. He is shaved bald, and there's an explanation for this. He wears a sharp suit and is angrily shouting into a phone, "Get back to the office." So the reason why I had to repeat multiple times, he is bald, shaved bald, is DALL-E just would not generate a bald head. And in fact, the original of this had him with like a shaved sides of his head and then like a pseudo mohawk, and it was either like you couldn't get the salt and pepper beard, like it refused to make white beards essentially, or I couldn't get Silk to be bald. So DALL-E has its limits, and its limits are generating bald guys.
You know what it is? I think it gets it in its head, because I was trying to dork around this as well, and I was like, wow, the comic book image of that one guy is great. I either get a salt and pepper beard with gray hair, or I get a gray beard. And then once it gets that in its head, like it does not, no matter how you goof with the prompt, it never lets go of it. And then you generate a new prompt. I will be excited when they add the feature in where I can like select a part of it and have it regen just that part of it. Like replace the dude, just the dude. Yeah. And other ones have done that. But I was just calling it out. It got it close. And then Mark, who does a lot of the thumbnails or most of the thumbnails for the channel, just revised it. And that was awesome. Welcome to the stream.
This was like an amalgamation of like 2 or 3 different ones that we generated. And I was like, well, this is clearly the best Silk. We just got to get rid of that hair on the top of his head. And this is the best Gowry, because I definitely 100% look like the guy in the thumbnail. Just perfect. No difference.
The one which gets me is you say the no difference thing is, I don't know if you've noticed this, but anytime I have an opportunity where it's both of us on screen, if I can make me be the 6-pack one and you the fat one, I will take that opportunity every single time. You get enough of like the model-esque like 6-pack ones where on like the beach one, just a little pudge. Just, it doesn't have to be a lot, just more than me, and I'm okay with it.
I remember we went back to Mark one time, and I think the note to Mark was, "Could you make Gowry fatter?" He was like, "Yeah, no problem."
Well, this is the cool thing is he uses a lot of AI in his images, so he's like, normally that would be impossible because we stretch their stomach, but he's like, no, I can just regenerate another dude to. It's. I love his approach to it, because typically most artists would be like, AI is going to ruin our job. They're coming for our jobs. And again, I get the fear, but it's cool that he's like, no, this is just another paintbrush. I would say paintbrush in my quiver, but that sounds like
I like that. I'm going to start using that.
Something an idiot would say it's another paintbrush in his toolkit to pull out. How long? Let's dive into remote working. How long have you been remote working?
Current job, a full year, pretty much since the beginning of the pandemic, I think. Yeah, and prior to that, maybe like one day a week, I would be telecommuting, if you will.
So,
They used to
so
call it telecommuting, which is hilarious.
that is true. Well, then they apparently remote working is now upsetting people because they question, is it working? Which is like hence why we're having this discussion. Like I always joke like I was social distancing before it was cool because I've been working remote for I
Oh,
don't know, maybe
I thought you meant you didn't have friends.
well that too. It was forced. It was at the lunchroom there. You go sit over there. Yeah, it was remote working because it was what? Gosh, it was since I started this business. 7 or 8 years plus that. So yeah, we're probably like 13, 14 years I've been working remote. And before that, it was every day, every hour in the office, both for when I worked at General Electric. They didn't like remote wasn't even an option because of some of the stuff we were working on. And then when I was doing the government contracting, same thing. That was you had to be on site. That one was the epitome of punching a clock. Even if you had nothing to do,
Yeah.
you were sitting in the chair.
So we've talked remote work before on stream. What's different this time? What was the impetus, if you will, for bringing it back?
I think the main one which got me wondering is I'm going to pull this up. I can share this out. We'll try and share it out. It might look terrible, mainly because I have like a zillion windows on my screen. Bear with me. 3, 2, 1. In theory, I can share that. Nope, I can share that.
And
nailed it.
fail.
And then I have that one. If I close that, this should work. All right, cool. Let me zoom on in. Yes, I am absolutely using ChatGPT's Bing protocol to pull these up. But the impetus was a lot of CEOs have come out with pretty strong opinions on whether remote working works, doesn't work. And it was OpenAI's Sam Altman, who I don't have. I'll see if I can pull up the direct quote, but his direct quote was the one which got me going. Like, I want to talk about this. Sam Altman expressed strong opposition to remote work, calling it a failed experiment. He stressed that the technology isn't good enough for people to work remote forever, suggesting that the best products are created when techies work together in an office environment.
I think the actual quote, because I don't want to just depend on ChatGPT here, was that it comes out as a failed experiment, says it was a mistake and that it's over. And that was in May.
Yeah, that was the exact quote. Thank you for pulling that up. But you look at a bunch of different other CEOs, and most of them are pretty strongly for it or against it. Weirdly enough, it was Facebook, which was Mark Zuckerberg, who said, observed that people have been more productive from home than anticipated, noting that some thought it was going to fall apart, but instead many have found themselves to be more productive. Summarizing, life finds a way. And I think it's interesting that they push on technology, and part of me looks at this and goes, I remember when I was at General Electric, they had collaboration pods, they called. And it was when this whole idea of they like reconverted the entire Vistion Village Center, which was like where the main office was. And they got rid of all of the top cubicles and then moved them to like these more open cubicles where you could like see and talk to people. And then they had these collaboration pods where you would meet as a group to come up with new ideas. And all they were like you could reserve them and people just use them for coffee meetups. Like there was never any work which got done at these things.
I thought you were going to be like, and they were just hotel rooms.
And they were just hotel rooms. I get suspicious of any office which puts a couch in it for you to stay there because like that's the expectation is like you're going to be here. I mean, heck, flipping it to home office, and again, I know I'm bouncing all over the place. Like I see that as a massive advantage to remote working is I have a couch in my office, but when it wasn't my own company, because that's kind of like, it's different there. When I was working from home for the consultant company, like there was oftentimes I was working later. I would go, Melissa's not home yet, or the kid, I didn't have kids at the time, but I'm home alone. I'll just keep doing what I'm doing, especially when I was doing like, let's say, hardcore pen testing. It was like, I am on a roll here. I have my shells open. I'm going to just continue. I'm going to go till 1, 2 a.m. and then I'll sleep in the next day. And I was more in charge of it. And it empowered me to do my own work and not go, okay, I need to fit all the work I have to do in during this time slot.
So Brayden said there's one answer. There is one answer. Collaborative jobs and tasks are better in person because the interactive bandwidth is so much greater. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, because it also kind of says like my job is not a collaborative job. And I think it just depends on the team. We'll get more into it as to like what job and work is amenable to remote work. I do think there are some classes of work that just don't jive well, and that tends to be when you have physical dependencies on the work that you are doing for equipment and such like that. That's an obvious. But like most office work, they just make up reasons why, oh, this job is more collaborative. Ergo, if you come into the office, you'll get more done with your team.
Let's talk about collaboration. When you were sitting at your desk at work, how of 100% of your time, when someone came up, how many times was it productive, which it helped you get more work done, versus distracting, which pulled you away from work?
Always distracting, but typically that interaction was me unblocking them, right? So my job for a long time has been the guy that unblocks other people. So that was kind of in my job description, to be interrupted. So I can't, I'm not even going to say that that's necessarily a bad thing. Sorry.
Sorry. I'm smiling that your job was to unblock people. You were the office laxative.
Yeah, pretty much.
I learned about the term in high school, digital disimpaction, when I found out someone had fasted a very long time and then ate a giant steak dinner afterwards. I'll leave that one to you guys to look up. But yes.
The flip side of that is, and I think everyone knows this person or persons, the office usually has at least one social DDoSer where once they get on a roll, no more work gets done that day. Not just for them, but for anyone in earshot of them. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. No, I remember the person who was in. So security was sectioned off into our own area of the office when I was at General Electric. And we had one person added to our team that completely decimated our team. GE had this wonderful strategy of moving people around, and it doesn't work for security. Like, it does not work for cybersecurity. People in cybersecurity want to stay in cybersecurity. They don't want to move around to like expand their expertise. This person was added to our team, did not jive at all, but would constantly say, "Oh, I'm so stressed. I'm so busy. I'm getting slammed into my desk right now." And they would say these phrases, and it would just break every focus the rest of the team had all day.
All right. So obvious full disclosure, Silk and I have been working 100% remote for quite some time, and we're good with it. We're good at it. But let's play devil's advocate. Why is remote work over, and what are the arguments to like convince me, right? Convince me that the remote work was an experiment that doesn't work and that we should go back.
I wonder if it depends on the job. Because again, I'll approach this as I own the business. It's my business. I have employees who I pay to work out of their house, and I have to ask the question saying, would they be better employees? Would I get more work out of them? Would I make more money off of them if we all were in an office together outside the physical restrictions because they're all over the country?
The argument is greed. You demand more out of each individual employee, regardless of whether or not they are already paying for what they're worth. I can understand the argument of I'm losing money off of this person, therefore they either come back and bring their productivity up or we cut them away. And that's a mathematical calculation, right?
The clarification is, would I make more if they were all in an office versus all remote? And from a consulting perspective, like if you look at it from a consulting perspective, I can make every argument of why it works better remote than it does in person. Here's why. Just in consulting, because your clients are not in the office. They're not coming in the office. They're remote anyway. So it is silly to have someone come into an office and then go, okay, now go work with all your clients who are remote anyway. So like in the security consulting, you now go, well, if I rub elbows with other people at the office who are doing similar things. But then I'd argue like consulting should be set up like a McDonald's franchise. It doesn't make sense for all McDonald's to be in one building. It makes sense that I would set up the procedures and documentation for repeatable work regardless of where it goes, so that every employee is able to do repeatable work. Again, put their own seasoning to it, but when they get a policy set, whatever, they can edit it. Within consulting, I'll go back to Braden though. Is there certain possession, like go programming? You've been in the programming world for a while. Does it help having other people within arm's reach to be able to talk to?
Yes, it actually does. And I say that, and for the beginning of your career, when you have not been exposed to not just generally programming techniques and like people, is it like they call them paradigms or patterns or whatever the hell you want to call them. When you haven't been exposed to those things and you're struggling to understand legacy code bases, the idea, they teach you this in school, the idea of pair programming, of just sitting down next to another person and walking through the code side by side, is legitimately valuable. And the ability to just pull up a whiteboard, draw some pictures, try and negotiate the understanding, because everyone learns a little differently. Not in the like, I'm a visual or verbal learner. It's just like trying to figure out when someone doesn't understand a concept and then rapidly pivot to explain it a different way until we get a meeting of the minds. That can be very useful in a person, in an in-person scenario. And I haven't found a replacement for that fully remote. Zoom is not a replacement for that. There exists, as far as I can tell, I don't know how, no good whiteboard software with an easy, I've tried, like I've done it, like getting an interactive whiteboard with tablets is like insanely expensive, even through something like Zoom and stuff like that. And I for the life of me can't draw with a mouse on like Paint. Like it's just not as being able to erase with your hand and rapidly redo something. So like there is value. There is value.
Funny. Oh, go on. I was just going to say, it's funny you say that, because that goes back to that Sam Altman OpenAI one of saying the technology isn't good enough yet. Is like, I have just seen recently, your whiteboard one, is we do the same thing, is using 2 iPads to be able to draw and do collaborative. Like it's just getting to that point now.
Which is insane, because it's such a simple idea, but like nobody executed it.
Yeah, well, the piece which hits me is like, so Teams, Microsoft Teams, which is what we use. And then it's funny because as a consultant, you have every downside. Here's the dark side to consulting. You have every one of these things installed. Some clients I communicate with Discord, Slack, Teams. Gosh, whatever the new flavor of the month is, I have them all installed. But Teams is like, we'll say, the pinnacle of the best of the best. It's awful. It is just awful. The screen sharing on it is awful. There's no way of live switching between, like Ecamm, which is what the software is. Even with this, I can have it automatically follow my cursor around. So whatever window I click on, it goes, okay, that's the window I should share. These critical features within Teams don't exist. And it is amazing to me that we can say remote working is possible when all the software is complete trash.
All right, so we've concluded that Sam Altman isn't entirely wrong on that. I can't necessarily entirely disagree with him, because for years and this is even when I was working in a fully distributed team, but I was in the office, like we were working across, like Maryland, Florida, Texas, like we had people in every single office. I wanted this whiteboard feature on a closed network type system, and it just wasn't there. You know, and and that was 5 years before the pandemic. Then the pandemic shows up, and you're like, "Well, I've always wanted this. I still want this. I don't have the time to build it myself." I don't know, man. Like sometimes I see things like that, and I go, "Fuck, should I just build this myself?"
It is kind of, but I don't want to get us down the Chat GPT route because like this was something I was thinking. I'll pull us down. This actually kind of does tie back to hey Gator, welcome, thanks for showing up. It ties back to a little bit of does remote work for me, chief innovation officer. Like one of the things like I have every employee do is like work to improve their own thing. I pay for ChatGPT Premium. Like they don't have an enterprise plan or they haven't opened it up. So I pay for it individually for everyone so that they can rapidly prototype new ideas, test new things. And I had a conversation with an employee recently and he said something which it was funny. It was a total opposite. And it was that my fear of ChatGPT or these AI programs is that it's going to make our kids never learn anything, which I'll be honest, I busted a gut on that one because I'm like, yeah, and there's no sense of learning anything when I have Google in front of me. There's no sense of learning math when I have a calculator. There's no sense in ever learning the planets because I can go to the encyclopedia anytime I want. There is no point to ever learning anything in some sort of like Athenian area because I can just go to a library and learn it. Like
if you went to the written encyclopedia today, it would be wrong because Pluto's not a planet anymore.
Because Pluto's not a planet. I think they've probably updated. I probably have to update that one. But
let me go check my copy of the Encyclopedia Britannica.
Cytoplasm is no longer a thing, or mectoplasm. One of them is no longer a thing. I don't know. This is critical information that you will get graded down in school for that you will never use, like calculus, unless you were a math teacher.
But I used calculus recently. Thank you.
Really?
It's been a decade, but yeah, I used it recently. I had to sit down and figure out a maximization problem. And when it clicked what the hell it was, I was like, oh no, I have to ask ChatGPT how to do calculus again.
He made this comment and I said it was, and I'll bring this back to my point was, he was like, it shuts down education. I said, no, I think for the first time ever, and like I'm bullish on AI and the or LLMs, mainly because it's different. Google encyclopedias, computers, internet, all of that was all about consuming data. It was all about like I want to rapidly take data and throw it into my mind. And a tool like ChatGPT is a creation device. It can be a consuming device, but now I can rapidly prototype things. So when you go, hey, I want to create a whiteboard. There was this overwhelming Herculean effort to get a ball moving from inertia to go, oh, I'm going to go create a whiteboard thing. But it requires this, that, and the other. Now I can rapidly prototype something which I could never before.
So,
hold on.
So this is actually,
but my fear when he said his fear with the kids are saying like, oh, they're never going to learn anything. Mine is it goes the opposite. They're going to start going, I can create everything. And they're going to have this. We already struggle with FOMO and imposter syndrome and all of that. They're going to have the opposite problem. They're going to be able to look at it and be like, everyone is creating everything so much cooler. Why even try when everyone is creating awesome things all the time? Like it's the opposite problem in my mind.
Well, that's yeah, and that's a good point. And I'll start up a project and I'll stop mostly because I realize, oh, other people are going to do this better. But that's I lost my thought.
Yeah, that everyone's going to do it better. That everyone's going to do it better. Herculean effort, get ball moving from inertia.
No. So Sam Altman says the experiment's over. I need to get back because the technology's not there yet. Think about what I said just prior. Having the in-person interaction when you're trying to teach a junior engineer something or, make them understand how page tables work. I'll just use that one, and how a machine works. To an extent, and we've talked about this before, a tool like ChatGPT actually, to a certain extent, replaces those interactions. because now you have your intern to go off and research stuff that could take you years to be able to mine out. And it's like having, to an extent, it's like having an expert available to help you understand concepts, and you can ask it to rephrase it or paraphrase or like teach you in a variety of different ways. And there's new. So like, it's a little weird for me to hear him go, the technology's not there, where one of the biggest values of being in the office is actually somewhat replaced by chat GPT being available. It's kind of at odds with each other, because I've had junior engineers who knew nothing about systems development. I mean, like operating systems development, stuff like that, all of a sudden become very effective at executing things that I never thought they would be able to, given their background, because I just said, ask ChatGPT about these 5 things, go off, use it, prototype, blah, blah, and then we'll come back and I'll pick on a few things that you missed, and we'll talk about that a little bit. And it's been very effective. And I use it in the same way. It's like having your own private tutor almost, which is kind of nuts. Now, I've said this before, don't ask it about math. But so it's a little
any
weird
counting whatsoever.
Yeah.
Any math whatsoever.
So it's a little weird to hear him say it's a failed experiment, but also his company is producing one of the greatest tools that would enable an individual lone worker in their home office to be far more effective than ever before. And I don't think that situation changes if they suddenly go back to the office. I think they're just doing the same thing in the office at this point.
It would be curious where you have Mark Zuckerberg, who created Llama 2. That was Facebook, wasn't it?
Llama. Yeah, Facebook is, or Meta, whatever.
Yeah,
the
Meta,
Facebook.
But it is curious for the comment you made is Sam Altman, OpenAI, hey, failed experiment, go back to the office while you're still using ChatGPT. Right when Llama 3 is coming to the point where like they can start competing with ChatGPT 4, open source hosting on your own infrastructure. Again, maybe a little bit of a conspiracy theory, but you do wonder if he's like, everyone back to the office, don't pay attention to new innovations. Like, just go back to what you were doing.
Yeah.
Because they've just landed some of the biggest deals they have, right as like, I could see like Llama 3 going to be getting adopted by Apple, where OpenAI is going to be adopted by like Bing. But then that even gets weirder because then Bing was trying to sell to Apple, and it's a wonderful incestuous conglomeration of corporations right now.
So
it's kind of gross.
What would make you go back to the office? Would it be your office? Would it have to be your office? Would you have to own it? And then you become Mr. Startup Man that owns the couch office, the office couch.
Here, I thought so. Here's the kicker, and maybe it's age doing this a little bit to me. General Electric was near the second half of my time there. I talked about the office a little bit, but that will bring my point. It was in the Visteon Village Center. We had one at the wings of the building. So the entire building was facing this giant lake and beautiful fountains, like acres of property. Like imagine like the center of the Apple Ring, where that's what we looked out on. The wings of the building were auditoriums, which went floor to ceiling through 3 floors. So we're talking like 35-foot ceilings for those auditoriums. We were the product security team, which was responsible for like doing security. Like I was building the product security team to do like industrial control system, SCADA fuzzing, things like that, like stuff which had never been done before. This is before it was like Sully and these things were a thing now.
I was hacking before it was cool.
It was like these things that they're like, the smart grid hit was just becoming a concept. So we were touching like $50,000, $60,000, $80,000. Like some piece of equipment would land on my desk and they'd be like, figure this out. And they're like, also it can never leave this room because it's like $100,000 and it's like per and like it's all secret. So you'd have to badge in and whatnot. So they had to give our team, our like 4-person team, this giant auditorium, like easily a place where you could have 40 people in this building, like 40 cubicles in it, but could sit 200 people if it was actually seating, like floor to ceiling, overlooking this lake. It is the best office you could possibly imagine. Easily, most beautiful, natural light, like everything you would want, I had there. And looking back at it, there was coffee there. It was our own culture in there. Like it was everything you could have wanted for working in an office. In looking back at it, even with all of that, the attraction to it lasts maybe 2-3 weeks before I'm like, okay, this is dumb. Because now I have to drive an hour there, an hour back, 2 hours of my time, which I'm not working. It's just I'm legitimately sitting in my car, like thinking, playing an audiobook.
Yeah.
Yeah, uncompensated
the only thing
time.
That I on the commute side, I said this, like I was lucky I had a commute that was maybe like 25, 28, 22 minutes on the best day. And I was always frustrated. And then I found audiobooks and I was like, I feel like I've reclaimed this time now. And then I realized, like, wait a minute. Why don't I just actually reclaim that time?
So, like, you asked me the question, which was like, what would it take to get me back to the office? And it originally, I would always switch jobs for two things: more money, more freedom. I was offered more money, I would leave. If I was offered more freedom, I would leave. And then as I've gotten older, it's always been more freedom, more freedom, more freedom. I have enough money, freedom, freedom, freedom. There is a limit. For me, it was somewhere around like 115. Once I hit like that 115 mark, like to throw actual numbers out, I now just want freedom. I want more time because in the month I left General Electric, I traveled 9 out of 11 weeks. Monday to Friday, 9 out of 11 weeks on a job which promised me maybe a week of travel a month. I went to turn my resignation and they're like, no, we will fix this. Because I entered like during a transitional period. Like I get it. Like they were trying to get coverage and all of that. Like justified in hindsight. But I started questioning them. Why am I married if I never see my wife? Why do I have a house if I never am in it? Why am I doing like all of this? When it broke me when the hotel person, when I walked in, he didn't even have to look at his computer and goes, "Oh, hey Alex," and it was like, all right, something's so broken here. It was such a nice gesture he did, and I was like, no, this is so like I was so like my face dropped.
That was the nicest gesture he could have ever done for you, which is make you realize your life is messed up while being pleasant.
And so going back to that, because I've gone through all of those, the only thing that would pull me back into an office, not full time, but partially like 3 days a week, would be if I had my team there, like my current team, and we use those 2 days legitimately to spitball ideas on a whiteboard. Because there is so many times I want to put up, like, here are our biggest clients, here are our biggest projects. How do we extract more revenue out of this? How do we grow these projects? How do we make these things work more smoothly? And being in the office on a whiteboard, I could see those, like, we'll call them power sessions, where it's like 2-3 hours or half a day workshop to do that, and then leave for a month and go execute on that plan and then come back like once, twice a month. That's what would force me back in the office, but it would just be workshop driven.
That's actually how I feel. I feel that even I kind of detest the idea of daily stand-ups or even weekly stand-ups as a thing, because generally speaking, people aren't working on stuff so collaboratively that whatever they're doing, and this is in software, so I understand this is very, very narrow of a take. People generally aren't working on things that are so blocked by other people's work that they have to talk to each other every day or every week. And I think people who have this idea that the office is a social place, that you're somehow missing a portion of life somehow by not being there, have poor work life opinions. Not even balance, just opinions. Like I go to work to make money, and anyone who says anything other than that is just full of it, because who doesn't want to sit on a beach all day drinking mojitos rather than doing something that doesn't necessarily interest you 100% of the time. Like I'd rather be playing my guitar. I'd rather be taking my dog for a walk. All these things, but you got to make money. And I don't think I think our society would look at somebody who said what I just said and say, I don't want that person on my team because they're not going to help my company or my business build success, when it's really just a lie in the other direction, where it's, no, what you're saying is you're greedy and you want me to spend my time to make you benefit without any reciprocation. No, I spend my time to make me benefit, which is the money you pay me, right? And breaking it down to that transactional nature, it's true though. Like
No, keep going.
Yeah. I want to add, like, there was one thing online. There was it was a Reddit thread. Of course, it's a Reddit thread, but there was an interaction about something like this online, where the topic of burnout came in American society, and they were talking about how millennials and Gen Z are burning out at faster rates than our parents, and how to deal with it. And I think it was somebody from France or some European came in and said, I don't understand why you guys don't take vacations, blah, blah, blah. And they were like, well, we take a week vacation. They were like, no, I mean like an actual vacation, like a month off every year to just recharge. That's how the rest of the world does it. And we're like, everybody in the thread was just like, wait, hold on. A month off? I wouldn't have a job if I took a month off. Do you understand how American business works? Like, if you're out of the office for a month, even if you're on PTO, people start asking, do we need to fire this guy even though he's taking his PTO? Like, if we're not missing him for 4 weeks, does he need to be here? Right? Like, that's how American society views work. It's kind of crazy.
Well, it's so both these things tie back. I wrote down 2 words. I wrote baby and money, because both of those are going to tie into the comment. Money, you said, like, I go to work to make money, and it's funny, and you're like, no one would hire me. I would hire you, because that is not, it's not a bad mentality to have. Like, I'm a consulting company. I will hire you, and the first thing I will tell you is, I am hiring you to make me money. That is your job, is to make me money. It sounds, I don't know why it sounds terrible. Like, this is your consultant job. It's my company. You are hired to make me money. But guess what? If you make me money, it covers yourself, and then I can pay you more. You have to make me more money than you cost for a consulting company.
Well, and so this is the thing, is not every business is like that, right?
Yep. Completely true. Completely true.
And the expectation is, not only are you being hired to make them money, you're being hired to, this is generally the way businesses look at employees, is not only am I hiring you to make me money, I'm hiring you to get you to help me maximize the money you make while I minimize the money I pay you. Mm-hmm. Right? Otherwise, we wouldn't be having these conversations about the minimum wage the way it is.
That's true. The other thing I wrote down was baby. And this is like, it was such a,
play with me, baby.
We get 2 types of employees when we hire. One is an employee who has worked remote and kind of has an idea of how to do it. Another one who has come from a 9 to 5, like has worked in an office. And those are the ones where it takes these weird interpersonal communications. So, like, one of them is having a baby. Baby's on the way. It's exciting. I'm thinking I don't know when it's coming. Like, it's not like you can plan these things. It's like, I don't know when it's coming. It's coming somewhere here. I don't know where to take the vacation and whatnot. And I kind of paused him. I'm like, vacation? Like, that's not vacation time. Like, this is in no way a relaxing experience for anyone who has had a young kid. It is a combination of sleep deprivation, and then, like, at times, just nerves, because the baby is sleeping and you're like no longer panicking, and you're like, I need to do something with my hands. What should I be doing? I can't sleep right now. Like, the baby needs something right now, but it's actually sleeping, and you're like in your own. I go, let's take a 1-week project, which should have taken a week. Let's stretch it over 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and just, it's over 3 weeks to do 5 days worth of work. And then we monetize all 3 weeks. And if you want vacation, if you don't want to be here, go for it. That's great. But that's not restful. Your vacation you should be using to go off and relax. Go full Gilligan mode, we call it. Like to the point where your phone is not on, you're incommunicado. Like we can't reach you. Like there's never a time. Like, if we cannot figure out how to run our business without calling you on vacation, we're doing something wrong. Like you should not be that critical. Like, and this is where it baffles me of like vacation as it's called, like going to a dentist office. That's not vacation. That is just life. Don't take a vacation day on that. It's just go do it and then come back. I understand this is different for consulting. I really do. Because if you're a salesperson at a camera shop, all of a sudden it's like, if you're not there, yeah, it's vacation. So, but part of me sections out business as...
That's actually exactly the issue, right? In American society. And this comes back to remote work because it breaks the control mechanisms you have to ensure people, quote unquote, are working. Is a lot of jobs define PTO. They combine PTO and sick days where it's like, oh, you get 24 days off a year for sickness and paid time off. But that's bizarre because it's like, what if I'm sick for 25 days? Like, it's not like I chose to be sick. Why should that crack into my vacation time? And somehow American society has accepted that degradation of our, like our personal rights to just like not work while we're physically incapable of working.
Well, and hold on, I'll take the alternate stance. You get 20. You're sick for 25 days. As a business owner, I'm expected to carry you all 25 days while you're sick. 30 days, 60 days, 90 days you're sick, 120 days. At what's the limit to me funding your whole thing?
No, and this is a good point. And this is where, like, this is why the whole thing has broken. I'm going to get back to remote work because it's relevant in this conversation. This is where it breaks, right? And where it breaks is very specifically the fact that employers are typically responsible for healthcare and carrying short-term disability insurance, or the employee is responsible for basically buying into that short-term disability, because those two things are more or less required for a business owner in order to prevent exactly that situation, so that an employee who happens to be out longer than a couple of weeks doesn't bankrupt them by the fact that you still have to pay them and all those things. In most other countries, those things are, quote unquote, socialized for exactly this reason. It takes it off of the business owner's plate. And it's like, oh, I still have to pay them a modicum amount, but most of it's coming out of short-term disability funds that we all pay into. So it's not hitting my pocket so hard. And eventually when I need to take it, it's there. So that's how people have gotten past it. But that's kind of the point. We have this argument. It was like, oh, now I'm responsible for that. And nobody wants to say, well, wait a minute. Couldn't we build a better system where not any one person is responsible for that, but we're all responsible for that? So that's a little on the political side. Fine. I'll leave it there.
It's really not, because it makes, it makes sense. It is. Right? It makes sense.
But where the work from home experiment fails in this regard is, what's the difference between me taking a random sick day and staying home and me working from home where you're incapable of knowing whether or not I'm actually at my desk?
Well, right? And then to compound this, or working a second job.
And we get into the overemployment discussion, which is going to be fun.
Yeah. So before we do that, I think the only other comment I wanted to make is, I think something that has changed in my mind since running a business, and this is one of those things, is like, there is emotion in running a business, obviously, with your employees and things like that. Like, you internalize it. The only other way this happens, by the way, is like the level above owning your own business. If you are like a venture capitalist where everyone's just a number, it's an Excel spreadsheet exercise. It's just how much profit. When it's your business, I have to look at my employees. Like, there's two ways of looking at employees. One, short term, they make money, they don't make money, see you later type of thing. The other one is like, I want to support this employee through this time where they're struggling, through this time like they're sick, through this time that they're pregnant or whatever it is. Because that employee, I want for 10 years. I'm going to pour education into them. I'm pulling your knowledge into them. And it's the same thing with clients. There's the if I have a client who needs this thing but can only pay this much and they're a startup company, I can make that investment as a small business and go, okay, cool. Because if they continue to grow, they're going to continue to use us. And it's that looking at this from the long term and tying this back to work from home is the quality of life and the quality of work better long term if we figure out how to make this balance work from working from home versus if I force them back into office, is it a short-term gain for a long-term loss?
Yeah.
So it's interesting when you see like Tim Cook, Facebook, Alphabet, all of these things, it does feel at a certain point that this is most of them are saying what is a balance of in office versus remote to make this work for the long term. But
we've also had this discussion before. At that level, their employees are not humans to them; they're numbers.
They're
right?
numbers. Yeah.
They use this messaging as an excuse to do a reduction in force, right? And to just say like, oh, this quote unquote doesn't work, so we're closing up shop on all these things. And also, by the way, we're cutting off all of these products we thought would work but don't, and all of those are being canceled. But it saves them political face to an extent. Right?
Well, so also it's when like one company does it, and then the other companies go, oh yeah, us too. We're riffing too, and then the next person goes, oh, reduction in force is a riff.
So let's talk overemployment. Let's talk overemployment. So first of all, the most overemployed person in America right now, I believe, is Elon Musk. He's the CEO of like 5 or 6 companies. Apparently being a CEO is the easiest job in America because you can do it 6 times.
So really quick, definition of overwork, as I understand it, is legitimately overemployment, not overwork. Overemployment is in theory, I have 2 jobs. I'm working both of them. I'm collecting both salaries. Or I'm working 3 jobs.
You're working full-time.
Full-time. For each of those jobs. Typically without either of the job knowing about it. Because otherwise you'd get out of it. This is most common development. And I think this is where that's the sweet spot of people who do this. Because in development, we've talked about this before, it is impossible to know whether or not that person is working or sitting there and wasting time. Like you can sit at your computer, and I almost think cybersecurity hits this part too. You can sit there breaking out into a sweat, staring at your computer, not touching your keyboard, and be working. Or you can be sitting there staring at a computer, not working. And there's no way of knowing the difference because one, you're processing, trying to figure it out. The other one, you're actually just staring at a computer. And I think this is why it's possible to have 2 jobs. Now, there's the ethics and all of that of it, but core definition, working 2 full-time jobs. What are your thoughts on this?
Legally, most contracts. Here are my thoughts. Legally, most contracts have an exclusivity agreement in them. So, like most of the people doing this are definitely just taking advantage of the fact that they can't be micromanaged. And the other part of me is like, more power to them. Because if you're able to actually execute 2 jobs to an acceptable standard, we'll say to a C grade standard where you're not getting fired by either, who cares? Like, that's my opinion. Who cares? Like, I know the company would be like, oh, but they could be using those excess hours to make me even more money. And my pushback on them would be like, well, then you probably need to pay them more money if you feel like that's the case. Right. And so that's the point at which people would scoff. Right.
Yeah.
That's how I feel about it. It's like, if somebody, as a hacker, if somebody is exploiting a system that has been set up that enables this to exist, to the extent that it's not hurting anyone necessarily, I don't give a shit. Go for it.
Well, this is what was really funny. I saw Prime Reacts where he got like an anonymous email from someone at one of the FANG companies of saying how you do this, like how they do it internally. And it was Oh my gosh, it was so gross, but so accurate reading it. Because like one of the things was they measure how well a developer does by commits, by lines of code change, by documentation and things like that. So it behooved you to write inefficient code because if you write inefficient code, it fails unit tests. Then because it fails unit tests, you can go and fix those unit tests. And then if you fix those unit tests, you have to document those things. So you create this whole loop of effort, which makes it look like you're doing a ton. And you spend more time documenting the process than in putting notes in there than writing an efficient line of code. And what they said is like the recipe to do this at multiple companies is do similar templated write-ups. And now that like ChatGPT makes this possible because you can have it automatically document your code and then comment on it and then just comment on other people's, because when employees are just looked at as numbers and they don't have like a manager overlooking them, you can then see it's like, okay, they've deployed this many. Here's their commit history. Here's the documentation. Here's how many tickets they've opened. And you just create this like shuffling around. And when I read this, when I read this, I was like, that is so gross. But I'd have to imagine that. So my thought went, I'd have to imagine everyone on your team knows what you're doing. And then the comment was, and talk to other people on your team and have them do this as well. So it was effectively like make your entire team do the overemployment so that it makes it look like your team is massively efficient. And I'm like, this is, I think, one of the reasons why every FAANG company is saying we need to get you back to the office because it will stop this from happening.
And it's bullshit, right? Like, because there's two ways to look at this. We can look at this as, oh, it's enabling overemployment and all that stuff. But like, if their response is, if we get them back into the office, they'll stop doing this thing. But those are the metrics that they've created a shitty game. That's the way to put it. They've created a shitty game, and engineers, being engineers, looked at this and said, oh, how do I min-max this game? This is how I min-max this game. Boom, done. It's not like they're going to stop doing that. The game hasn't changed. They're just going to do it in the office.
It's going to be really funny when you're pushing commits to another company's repo from another IP address, and then they're going to be like, oh, okay, we're going to just like ban these IP address from committing to our code. And then what does the engineer do? They make a CI/CD pipeline to deploy it on their behalf to the other one. Yep. Like I'm just waiting for the point of seeing like the chat dev and some of these more advanced, like where it's multiple agents working together to do like something within ChatGPT, where like someone just goes like, oh, I've already seen this on YouTube that people are creating auto scripter, like put in a prompt. ChatGPT auto creates a script, grab chunks of that script to create automatic video with overlays, which then creates automatic editing. And it's an auto YouTube channel. You just punch in a topic and it just creates shorts to try and get ad revenue. Now, Google's has started banning these quite heavily, quickly, because they're pretty easy to detect. But like, how long until someone does this for development projects where it's like, okay, I'm going to sit on the phone, I'll answer all the leak code thing, I'll sit there. And then how long can I just have like my autonomous agent do code commits before they notice? It would be 3 months minimum. It'll be 3 months to hire and fire someone.
Minimum. But that's kind of the point, right? Like all of a sudden, if they realize people are doing this, it becomes harder to document what you need to document to fire someone, because they have already created the document trail which prevents them from being fired. Right? They're proving by the standard metrics that they're unfireable. And I think that's what terrifies a lot of these big company managers is they look at somebody who's defeated their game, and because it is a game, that's what it is. They've defeated their game. They figured out how to min-max it, and they're like, I don't like this, so we need to stamp it out before it becomes rampant. And they're just missing the forest for the trees.
It's funny because AWS has been notorious for creating Google and AWS have very different models. They're very different models when it comes to their cloud computing. And it's interesting because AWS has smaller teams with very strict responsibilities for pushing products to market, which all hold their own P&L, their profit loss statement. Every individual team is responsible for that within the AWS system. So when a new service goes out, there is a profit loss specifically for that new service. Google Cloud, no such thing exists, which means that there might just be this team which goes, hey, we have something cool. Now, this is exactly why Google has more innovation within their cloud platform than AWS does, because they just have teams which are like, go create something new. Don't worry about how much it costs. Just go create it. And that's why you get things like Transposer and stuff like that, which don't exist really in AWS. But Google's recognizing, holy crap, we've created an environment where we can lose huge chunks of money and not even be able to articulate where it is. And we don't have great metrics on who's costing us that money. And are they actually producing anything of value? So I don't know of a good... I almost wonder if they all got together and like, how do we fix this? And the best solution they came up with on the whiteboard, which they can't use remote, they had to meet in person because there isn't a whiteboard solution, is send people back to the office. Like, I can't help but think, is that the only solution they could think of to fix this?
I wouldn't really necessarily disagree with that. I'm just imagining a bunch of CEOs of all these major companies getting together for one of those like smoky cigar back room, and they have a standard whiteboard, and then there's just like end goal at the top, back to office, and then there's just a giant question mark of how. Like, how are we going? But I mean, like, here's the thing. We know that these big companies have done shit like this before. There was the whole anti-poaching agreement that they had for a really long time that suppressed developer wages. And then as soon as that got knocked out, developer wages like doubled in like 2 or 3 years.
It is. It's funny when you start thinking about it as, okay, let's just, for the sake of thought exercise, these are all evil corporations which want to completely raise the dollar value or raise how much profit they are and pay you as little. The definition of job to them is just above broke. We want to pay people just above broke and get the maximum amount of profit. And I cannot, when you put your mind in the sense, most of the actions they take are completely driving towards that.
Yeah, of course.
And part of me goes, that's capitalism, that's what they should. But this is where I get into that late stage capitalism conversation, which is we are living in late stage capitalism, 100%.
100%.
Like,
and this is why, like, you know, the idea of software developers having a union is kind of almost silly, but at the same time, like, that's what they're combating. Like, software development is one of the few industries where having a union doesn't make any sense, because the individual software developers' power of negotiation is so much higher than your typical manual laborer. So, right. And that's why, like, what unions give electricians and plumbers and all these people, what it gives them is the power to negotiate and withhold their labor in an effort to get better quality employment out of their employers. But as an individual developer, like, what caps that out is that I'm not going to say you can only have a plumber that's so good, quote unquote, but
you can do standards. Plumbing can have standards that they can adhere to.
What I mean by this is there's only so much money you can make off of an individual doing plumbing or doing electrical work, right? As a software developer, it's much more nebulous what the value of an individual is. And one developer can absolutely, like, make 10, 20, 30x their salary by just, they produced a thing that just took off. So the idea of what is the value, quote unquote, of an individual developer in a company puts you, and the dearth of talent available, like we're like 1 million jobs available on the market and there's no one to fill them or some shit. that type of thing. The power dynamics of the individual developer and negotiating a contract is so different than your typical laborer. But at the same time, when you hear, oh, you have this $1 trillion company that is basically just trying to maximize profit and minimize salaries, all of a sudden you're like, oh, I have no qualms with multiple developers like negotiating with each other to bilk them.
I mean, I disagree in a couple things. One of the pieces I disagree is that if a developer goes off and creates this thing which makes 100x, that's not their job within the strict sense of development. Your job is to here are the specs of what I want you to create. Go and create this thing. If you're not to be how things, if you're an innovator to go create something new, if we think about an electrician, you're here to, or a plumber, you're here to go do the standard plumbing of this house. Boom, that's junior level thing. Senior level is there's an artisan's house which wants to do all copper plumbing and have it exposed in the ceiling to make it look more steampunky. All of a sudden, that's now master plumber because they're now creating something. Again, still off a spec. If your job is to go, here is an idea and you bring it to fruition, you're at a totally different level than the people you're going to assign tasks to.
Right. But my point is, most of the software industry views the standard developer as that creator level individual. This is why when you talk to people, this is why when you talk to companies, they're like, we only hire the best. I was like, no, you don't.
This is the question, though. It's like, what does that mean? Like, I have not been in the development. I haven't been in the development industry. Like, I've been in the cybersecurity industry. And within cybersecurity, hackers, pen testers, it is like, people think pen testing is just like, oh, it's pen testing. It's kind of the same way of development. Oh, it's pen testing. It's security testing. The amount of nuance within like pen testing, they think is like that's the smallest piece of it. No, it's like from there you can go. Let's go down any route. Networking, application, database. Let's go application. Cool application. There's now static, dynamic, binary static code analysis. That's what Veracode does, and then. In between there, you then go, okay, like let's focus on third-party library integration where can I break out of the just-in-time compiler within Java? Like all of these nuanced pieces, which you could spend your entire career on this one little piece. And it's baffling to me that the best way how do you actually, this is even simpler than that. How do you determine, this is where I just completely, it breaks my brain. Consulting, I don't care how good they are at something because I can measure that position based off of the revenue they bring in, the P&L. Inside a company, how do you measure this is a good developer versus a great developer versus an excellent developer? And the best way you can do it is what? Elite code challenges, which all can be solved now like by ChatGPT. So how do you determine good versus great?
How many jobs they can do at the same time.
How many jobs they can do at the same time.
Yeah. How overemployed they can be.
Yeah. And I think our metrics are completely busted for what makes someone good at what they do. What makes you a good programmer? What makes you a good hacker?
Making the maximum amount of money for your boss while being paid the least amount possible.
Well, that's what consulting makes the math easier because I can just look at like, okay, here's your P&L, here's how much it costs. Like you can do it very easily. Inside a company with a budget, I can't help but ask, how do you determine if someone's good or bad? Like,
don't ask me. I have no idea.
How often they wear a kilt versus how often they don't. Actually, that would be a good metric.
I'll take that metric any day of the week.
I mean, this is what I struggle with when we interview new people is it's funny. This is probably a video I need to make, which is I think resumes are completely dead. I think I will hire someone with a web page and write-ups 10 times over 10 than their resume. Considering resumes are stupid in general because like legitimately, it's like it's like the same. All right, this ties back to what you taught me. You taught me this. which I was raised, don't put anything on social media because then they can find you. I have whole stories on my mother. I love her dearly, saying like, make sure you lock your door. The axe murderer will come in at night. Like
counterpoint. They did in fact find you.
and this was the funny part was you taught me is social media is what you put out there that you want the world to see. Like one, you can't be blackmailed unless if you're proud of it. But in the same way, your resume is all of the stuff you want them to know about, all the stuff that you're bragging about that you want to show. Where it's like, I want to know what you do in your free time. Like, are you like dorking around with Hack the Box, or are you dorking around? Do you have passion about this? Like, what have you produced? Like, what are you doing your free time on? Is it within this industry? Like, those things impress me. The hell
we're just belaboring points we've talked on stream about before.
What are your final thoughts?
The horse is dead. And we're just sitting here. We're just sitting here kicking it for fun. It's fine. No, I mean, my thoughts are. There is a certain class of employee that doesn't do well 100% remote. And I think junior engineers in particular, moving from a college space where socialization is very available, in the sense of you go to class, you meet friends, you hang out, you do homework together, then you go out drinking or whatever. That is... if you were to move from that to 100% remote with no day-to-day personal interaction with your coworkers, it would be and is very jarring, right? And that can ultimately lead to burnout. That can lead to depression. It can lead to lots of things. And so to a certain extent, I do think the business leaders, quote unquote, are thinking about those things, but I don't think that's what's driving these particular decisions. Because I think those things can be mitigated by telling your junior employees, log the fuck off at 5:00 and go play a game at a game store, right? Or go play music with friends. Go do anything other than work, right? Like go stop making me money and go live your freaking life, right? And that is so antithetical to a typical business, especially startups. That is so antithetical to that to American business that the only way that these business leaders see to solve the work from home problem, even in the context of this particular issue of junior engineers and the socialization issue, is to say, fuck it, just get them back in office. And I think that's why I just have no respect for the blanket, like, oh, it's a failed experiment. No, it's not a failed experiment. You have failed to implement healthy work-life policies that manage this problem.
I couldn't say that better myself. I would say I've experienced this as I've worked from home longer, going, I can walk upstairs and grab another cup of coffee and go high five my wife and kids, like if they're home for the day. Like that is a quality of life improvement you lose like easily.
I remember right when the quote unquote back to work effort or back to office effort started, there was a company that invited everyone back to work, and they had a sign outside waiting for employees that said something like, "I'll bet your dog misses you." And it was just like, somebody thought that was a joke that was funny. And instead it's just like, welcome to Depression Central. Right?
I think I remember when that one went viral like that. Oh gosh, that's horrible. I think the biggest piece you pulled out of this one is much when we don't really talk to other people in other countries nearly enough to know the radical difference of life to work ratio, work to life ratio there. And actually it's probably life to work ratio versus in the US, it's very much a work to life ratio. Yeah, it's terrifying. Everything is broken. Everything is broken all the time. Abandoned computers return to monkey. Is that what you want to say?
I've kind of given up being that negative. I kind of like computers. I kind of like computers this year. We'll see how I feel next year.
I mean, it's the end of the year. You can start making your grand
Exactly.
aspirations. With that, thank you so much. Thanks for dialing in for Hacker Hangouts on a Saturday morning. Thank you for spending your time with us. Very much appreciate it. Thanks for watching. And hack on.